About a month ago, I was in the mood for soft pretzels. You know, those delicious soft pretzels you get at the mall. But obviously, I didn't want to go to the mall. So I began to look around to find a recipe and I decided to give it a shot. I made them and I will link that video down below. And they were good, but they weren't great. You know, if I couldn't find another recipe, I would make them again, but I was going to keep looking to see if I could find a recipe that was just a little bit better. Well, I found a recipe, and today I'm going to try my second soft pretzel recipe. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Tracy Martirana, and I use my knowledge of nutrition, herbal remedies, yoga, and meditation to bring you new videos every week on these topics. Click the subscribe button, and you'll never miss one. I'm just getting the first several ingredients in this recipe into my stand mixer. So it was some yeast with some warm water, salt, brown sugar, and a little bit of butter. And then I'm just letting my dough hook mix it all up as I dump in my flour. Letting it go for a few minutes and then just bringing it over to hand knead it. This recipe actually comes together really fast. It's just blending up the dough, letting it rest for about 10 minutes. And then, of course, the tedious part is shaping it into all the pretzels. But the actual creation of the dough, really not all that difficult. So after I knead it, I'm just forming a ball. I'm going to let this rest in this bowl covered with a dishcloth. I'm just going to set it aside for 10 minutes to rest. And while it's resting, I'm going to prep my pans for baking and also get my water ready because just like bagels, pretzels have to be boiled before you bake them. So the water here, it's just about 9 cups of water and a half a cup of baking soda. I just whisked it together to make sure the baking soda was nice and dissolved, and then I'm letting it heat up, coming to a boil. And while that's happening, I'm just prepping my baking sheets, putting on some parchment paper, and also spraying them. I don't typically do both, but this recipe specifically said to make sure to spray the parchment paper so the pretzels don't stick. The recipe said 12 pretzels, so I divided the dough into 12 somewhat even pieces. The pretzels came out a little bit small, I think, which was the same issue I had with the last recipe. I followed the instructions on how many to make and how far or like how long to make my rope before I tied the pretzel shape. They still, to me, were small, not like what you get in the mall. So if I were to make these again, the one thing I would probably do different is make less. Instead of 12 pieces, I don't know, I'd probably go down to maybe 8 and see how that works out. And then the fun, haha, I say that sarcastically, the first few are fun. I do get better at it as the process goes, but making pretzels is fairly tedious. You have to roll the dough out into about 22-inch long snake. And again, if I were doing this again in the future, I would use more dough and I would probably go out more like 26 or 28 inches. I think I'd have to give it a try to see how that works. But in my mind, I think that would make what I think of as the more realistic size of a soft pretzel. And I just measured to make sure that what I had pictured as about 22, 23 inches really was. And then making the pretzel shape isn't difficult. After you do it a couple times, it starts to become pretty natural, but you just make the little U shape, double twist, fold it over, and then press those pieces together so that when you boil it, it all stays in one piece and doesn't uncoil. And I'm just making this one and setting it aside while I make another one because I'm going to boil just 2 at a time. I don't think you want to crowd your boiling pot. You don't want them to stick together. 2 seems like a good number for the size of my pot. And in attempting to do this one, I completely messed it up. It got all just weirdly twisted. So I just undid it, added a little flour so that it wasn't quite so sticky, and tried again. Second time was the charm. And then we pop them into boiling water. And of course, if you remember, the boiling water has baking soda in it. That is the only real leavening agent anywhere in this. There's no sourdough, there's no baking soda in the dough itself. It's only in the boiling water. I just drop them in. I give the first one a couple seconds head start, just so that the other one isn't overdone by the time I get the first one back out. The recipe said to boil them just for about 20 seconds, and I feel like the last one, I'll have to look back at that recipe, but I feel like the other one had me boil them a little bit longer. And then I just have this towel here so I can get a little bit of the extra moisture off it before I place it on my baking sheet. And then I'm just sprinkling some coarse salt on it while it's still nice and wet. I do believe the last recipe I tried had me doing an egg wash. This one did not, and the salt seems to stick just fine to the damp, recently boiled dough. And then I'm just going to continue this process, making 2 pretzels, and then I boil them, put them on the baking sheet, move on to do 2 more, boil them, put them on the baking sheet. Oh, put them on the baking sheet and salt them, just to be clear. You must salt them while they're still nice and wet. And I did take my husband's suggestion. The last time he felt I went a little too light on the salt, even though he is not a big salt person. He agreed that pretzels, they're meant to be salty. So I did up the salt. I got the first 6 done and in the oven, and I'm moving on to the last 6. Now, one thing to notice, they're taking a little bit longer than I thought they should to get done, and I realized after the fact that I actually had my oven set a little bit low. The recipe says 400 degrees, I was doing 350. And then another thing to note is with the second batch, I am, instead of an egg wash, I'm doing a little bit of melted butter. After I got the first ones in the oven, I started thinking, when you get them in the mall, they tend to be, in my mind, a little overly buttery, but I feel like they do have that buttery goodness about them. So I thought, well, let me just add it to these and see if there's any significant difference. Spoiler alert, there is not a significant difference between the ones that had butter and did not. And after about 20 minutes in the oven, this is what they look like. And I'm just going to pop the other ones in, let those bake off, and then we have these delicious pretzels to enjoy, well, for as long as they last. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.